Over the past year or so, we've seen a lot of powerful handhelds come into the space, right? We saw the Steam Deck, we saw the ROG Ally, and a bunch of cool devices from boutique brands like Ioneo, but all of these devices run AMD chips, and with good reason, because Intel's offering in this form factor is just, it's not competitive. But I always wondered, what would Intel's response be? Turns out, they've been working on something pretty cool, and this is it here. So this is the MSI Claw, and this is the first handheld that uses the new Intel chip, the new Meteor Lake chips. So at first glance, the external hardware might look like just a black ROG Ally, but it's actually a pretty different kind of product. So the first thing, the handheld ergonomics of the MSI Claw feel surprisingly different from the Ally. Like if you look at them just from the top view, they don't look that different in terms of just like the shape of them. They both have that kind of angular bottom and they have like a similar kind of feel, but this device is a lot flatter. If you looked at them, kind of like their profile of them. The black device, the MSI Claw, that hump, like this over here, it makes a very big difference when you're holding it. So one of the things I've always, not really complained about, but noted about the Ally is, despite the kind of flatness of the product and me liking how flat it is, it does have a very flat grip to it. And I've never loved the ergonomics of this device compared to like the Steam Deck. This has like a super bulbous hump, the Steam Deck's grip. These have what I would consider to be like the most ergonomic feel of all the handhelds. This is in between. The MSI Claw feels like it's a mixture between like semi-flat, but having a nice hump on the back. And I really like the way that this thing feels. Now it is smaller than say something like the Steam Deck. This is a more compact system and also has a 7-inch screen, just like the Ally. It is a little bit heavier, but this product overall is just, in my mind, a direct competitor to the ROG Ally. It just has a completely different chip. Now I do want to mention just these buttons. These light up. I've never seen a handheld console where the A, B, X, Y buttons light up. It's running these lights underneath some smoked plastic, so it's not like a super bright light, but they do light up if that matters to you. Now the chip in here is an Intel Core Ultra 7, but I'm shooting this on pre-production hardware, so the exterior design of this product is pretty much finalized. I imagine that it's so late in the game that they couldn't change too much at this point, but in terms of the performance and the drivers and the internal stuff, that can all be tweaked and adjusted before launch. Now in terms of power profiles, there's 3 of them. So at the very bottom, you have the super battery mode that pulls 15 watts, and then the balance mode pulls 30, and at the top end, if you want to go full blast, extreme performance, 45 watts. Now, there's a couple things to take away from this. I guess the first thing is that at the top end, if you want to, this system can pull more juice than the ROG Ally. This thing caps out at 30 watts. This is 45 at the top end. But at the bottom end, the other takeaway is that the kind of, if you're playing like really light titles like 2D indie games, or if you want emulation, this system can, at the lowest it'll go is 15 watts, where this can go like 9 or 10 watts. So there's a difference in kind of like the where the power profile lies. The performance testing I was allowed to do on it though was very limited, and because of that, I can't get a good gauge of how efficient this chip actually is. My initial impressions though is that this system is on par with what the ROG Ally does at that 25 to 30 watt profile. Now, if you open it up, you can tell that this system was built to handle more power draw. It has 2 fans and 2 heat pipes, which is great because it allows you to cool the system very well, but there was this one area that kind of concerned me. In the menu, I noticed that there was a cooler boost option. Now, cooler boost is the kind of software feature that a lot of MSI laptops have that just turn the fans on to max, is for like overclocking a lot of their devices. But on this system, when I hit this cooler boost button and the fans kick in, that's loud. Like, that's hella loud. Now, I never had to turn this on. And all my testing, I was like, why would you even need that option? Because it never gets hot enough to require it, and it was never activated to the point where the cooler boost was just like actively running like that. But I thought, why would they even put this in here? Like, does the Intel chip just unlock to some kind of crazy performance mode when you blast the fans on it? I can't tell on this pre-production unit, like this engineering sample doesn't seem to have a need for the cooler boost at all, but maybe on the retail unit, there is a purpose to it. Now, in terms of the normal fan noise and normal kind of thermal characteristics, it's a very cool and quiet system, like way cooler and quieter than previous Intel handhelds. Those were all like comically poor. This is really good. But again, in terms of like an actual comparison between this product and AMD, I need a retail unit to come in. Now, there's a bigger battery inside the MSI Claw. This is a 53 watt-hour battery, which is significantly larger than the one that's in the ROG Ally. This is a 40 watt-hour battery. I think just based on sheer size, it's like 30, maybe 35% bigger inside the MSI claw, but MSI is claiming a 50% increase in battery life. So I think it's possible. Based on my limited testing, I think at the 15 watt profile, you can get about 50% more battery life on the MSI claw versus the ROG Ally. But again, I really need to get the retail units in to do some proper testing. But it is interesting that that's the claim that they made, a 50% bump in battery life over its competitor. A couple things I want to close this video on. The screens, actually, I'll bring this back in real quick. I think they're the same screens between the two devices. They're both 7 inches, they're both 120 hertz. I think the Claw also has variable refresh rate, but I do think that they're awesome screens. Like the Ally had a great screen for an LCD panel. If there's one screen you're gonna bring it over, I'm glad it's that one. Now the controls, why do I keep removing this? The controls between the two are very similar in terms of just like the layout and functionality. But I would say the biggest difference is actually in the back button. The ROG Ally has a large back button, but the only way to really actuate this, or the way that I think most people do it, is by pressing this section of it, this kind of like angled piece here. So if you're in game, you would press it like so. If you try to press it from the outside, it doesn't really trigger. Same with the top or the bottom. It's really, you gotta press it there or you don't press it at all. On the MSI Claw, it's a smaller button. I'll flip it around so you can kind of see the size comparison. The Claw does have a smaller back button, but this thing has a bunch of facets to it. And I noticed that when you can trigger it any way. Like you can press any one of those different facets and it would work. So when you're in game, you can trigger it from the top. Like being able to press down on it, it's just like where your hand naturally rests. You can trigger them like that. And I just found it to be really useful in Street Fighter 6, just any game that uses back buttons where you want to use back buttons. I like that usability, but it's a minor detail. Thought I'd bring it up because I just noticed it when I was using it during this short testing period. But there you have it. That is the MSI Claw. I think this is such a neat product. It came out of left field. Like I was not expecting Intel or MSI to drop something like this. It just wasn't on the radar. So it's cool that they actually have something that competes with all those AMD products out there. Okay, there you have it. MSI Claw.